Let me ask you something that most people avoid asking themselves. Am I living wisely? Not. Am I successful? Not. Am I popular? Not even. Am I happy? But am I living wisely? It's a question that cuts through the noise, and yet, it's one we rarely pause long enough to consider. You see, in a world that celebrates speed, convenience, and image, wisdom has become underrated. But the ancient Stoics believed that wisdom wasn't just for philosophers or scholars, it was for everyone. Wisdom wasn't about how much you knew, but how well you lived. Think about it. What if wisdom is how you respond when things don't go your way? How you treat people who can't offer you anything in return? How you behave when no one's watching? Wisdom, in the Stoic view, is a way of being. It's discipline, it's perspective, it's clarity. And here's the truth. You don't need a high IQ to be wise, but you do need the courage to be honest with yourself. Because stupidity, and yes, let's use that word, intentionally, isn't about lacking intelligence. It's about refusing to live with reason. It's about rejecting growth. It's about doing the same things that harm you again and again because it's comfortable. And let's be honest, we all do stupid things sometimes. We all avoid hard truths. We all act out of impulse instead of intention. But what separates the wise from the foolish is simple: self-awareness. So this video, it's not here to judge anyone. It's not a list of insults or harsh critiques. It's an invitation, a gentle confrontation to look in the mirror and ask, is the way I'm living aligned with the person I say I want to become? Because if we're not willing to ask hard questions, we'll keep getting easy answers. And easy answers don't build depth. They build comfort zones. They build illusions. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic emperors, once said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." And that's what this is about. Being one, being wise, not just appearing put together, but being inwardly aligned, not just reacting to life, but living with presence. So before we dive into the signs of foolish behavior, the ways we betray our better selves without realizing it, I want to offer you a choice. Not a checklist, not a command, a choice. You can close this video and keep doing what you've always done. Or you can stay and take this as an opportunity to reflect, not to criticize yourself, but to recalibrate, because no one becomes wise overnight. Wisdom isn't a finish line, it's a direction. It's a compass you return to every day, in the small decisions no one sees. When you choose restraint over impulse, silence over noise, depth over performance, that's wisdom. And every single one of us can access it not by adding more information to our lives, but by subtracting the noise and returning to what matters. So, are you ready? Ready to explore the habits and mindsets that keep us stuck in cycles we never meant to repeat? Not to shame, but to illuminate. Because when you know better, when you see clearly, you no longer have to live on autopilot. You can choose differently. So let's begin, not with judgment, but with curiosity, not with criticism, but with courage. Let's take the first step toward the kind of life that doesn't just look wise from the outside, but feels wise on the inside. Let's talk about something that's everywhere, and yet rarely questioned: image. In today's world, it's almost impossible not to care about how we look. Scroll through your phone, and you'll see it: perfectly curated selfies, filtered smiles, designer clothes, dream vacations, polished brands. Everywhere, we're being told, look like this, be like that, and maybe you'll be enough. But here's the hard truth. We are drowning in appearance and starving for authenticity. There's nothing wrong with wanting to look good. Taking care of yourself is a form of self-respect. But when appearance becomes our primary currency, when we start measuring our value by likes, comments, or compliments, we begin to trade something far more precious: our character. The Stoics, thousands of years ago, warned us about this trap. They saw the vanity of clinging to things that fade: beauty, wealth, status, and Marcus Aurelius said it best: The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Let that sink in, because what you focus on becomes who you are. And if your thoughts are constantly revolving around how you look to others, rather than who you are to yourself, your soul starts to take on that shallow hue. Here's the irony. The more we chase external validation, the emptier we feel inside. The more we obsess over how we're perceived, the less time we spend becoming someone worth perceiving deeply. So I'll ask you a question you may have never stopped to consider. When your beauty fades, what remains? If the mirror stopped flattering you, if your following disappeared tomorrow, if no one ever complimented you again, would you still feel valuable? Would you still know who you are? The danger of living for appearance is that it's a house built on sand. It shifts, it crumbles, and when life gets real, as it always does, beauty won't hold you, but character will. Character is the quiet way you show up when there's no applause. It's how you speak to someone who can do nothing for you. It's whether you tell the truth, even when it's easier to hide. It's the promises you keep, the battles you fight in silence, the values you refuse to compromise even when it's inconvenient. And the world doesn't see those things, but you do. You live with yourself at night. You know whether your life is skin deep or soul deep. So if you've been feeling empty lately, even though everything looks good on the outside, if the compliments still leave you cold, if your confidence feels like a roller coaster that rises and falls based on what others think, it might be time to stop polishing the surface and start building from the inside. Look, we've all been there. We've all chased attention over depth. We've all believed the lie that says if I just look a little better, then I'll finally feel better. But what if the truth is the opposite? What if you started cultivating a life that feels good even if no one ever sees it? That's where peace lives. That's where real confidence is born. And that's the wisdom the Stoics were pointing to. Because beauty fades, trends change, social media algorithms shift, but character, that's eternal. That's the part of you no one can take away. So, ask yourself today, with honesty and courage, have I spent more time curating my image than shaping my integrity? Am I becoming someone I respect, or just someone I hope others will admire? You don't have to abandon beauty, but don't let it distract you from something far more lasting. Because in the end, you are not just what you look like. You are what you live like. And the soul, the real you, is always watching. Let's be honest for a moment. One of the hardest things to do, yet one of the most powerful things we must do, is this: own our part. It's easy to point the finger. It's easy to say, they did this to me. Or life just keeps throwing obstacles my way. Or, if only they hadn't, I wouldn't have. But here's a truth that separates the immature from the mature, the reactive from the resilient. You may not be responsible for what happened to you, but you are responsible for how you respond. That's the core of Stoic wisdom. We don't control the weather. We don't control other people's actions. We don't even control what happens tomorrow. But what we do control fully, completely, undeniably, is how we choose to show up in the face of it all. When something goes wrong, the question isn't, who can I blame? The question is, what part did I play in this, and how can I grow from it? That's not weakness. That's strength. That's not self-blame. That's self-leadership. Blame might feel good in the short term. It relieves us of guilt, shame, and effort, but it comes at a cost, or power, because the more you blame others, the more you give them control over your peace, your choices, your destiny. Think about it. If it's always their fault, then your healing is always in their hands. That means your freedom, your forward movement, depends on someone else changing. But what if you chose a different path? What if, instead of waiting for them to apologize, you learned what this moment is trying to teach you? What if, instead of reliving what they did, you asked, what is this revealing about me? Maybe you tolerated too much. Maybe you ignored red flags. Maybe you didn't speak up when your boundaries were crossed. Maybe you betrayed your own voice to keep the peace. That's not about shame, it's about awareness. Because once you see your role clearly, You can change your future intentionally. Here's the truth most people run from. Avoiding responsibility may protect your ego, but it sabotages your evolution. Growth doesn't come from finger pointing. It comes from mirror holding. And holding that mirror takes courage. It takes humility. It takes a mindset that says, even if this wasn't all my fault, I still have a part to play in where I go from here. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. We often feel stuck in life not because of what happened, but because we're stuck in the story we're telling ourselves about what happened. So let me ask you right now about something you're struggling with. A relationship that hurt you, a job that disappointed you, a dream that didn't go as planned. Have you asked yourself yet? What part did I play? Where did I abandon myself? What can I do differently next time, not to avoid pain, but to move through it with integrity? Because that's the moment transformation begins. Responsibility isn't about perfection. It's not about being at fault. It's about reclaiming authorship of your story. And the people who do that, they don't wait for life to hand them a better chapter. They write it. So if you've been stuck in blame, if you've been replaying the same story with a new cast of characters, pause. Ask yourself, what truth am I avoiding by staying the victim in this script? Because here's the invitation. Stop rehearsing powerlessness. Start choosing responsibility. Not because it's easy, but because it's the only path to freedom. And in the end, you don't need to be right about the past. You just need to be responsible for the present. Let me ask you something simple but uncomfortable. If no one ever saw what you were doing, would you still do it? Would you still buy that outfit? Still take that trip? Still post that photo? Write that caption? Make that move? Or has your life slowly started orbiting around what they might think? It's subtle at first. You post a picture and then check back, just to see if anyone noticed. You say something smart and wait for applause. You go somewhere not because you want to, but because it'll look good on your story. And before you realize it, your life has become a performance. Every move carefully crafted for approval. Every decision filtered through the invisible eyes of an audience you don't even really know. Here's the hard truth. You're not living for yourself anymore. You're living for applause. And applause is addictive. But it's also unpredictable, because today they'll cheer for you, and tomorrow they'll scroll right past you. They'll like your post today, and forget your name next week. That's not cruelty. That's just human nature in the age of algorithms. So what happens to your peace? When your worth depends on their reaction, you become anxious. You second-guess everything. You stop trusting your own voice and start outsourcing your confidence. And that's the beginning of disconnection, not just from others, but from yourself. The Stoics saw this danger over 2,000 years ago. They warned against living for the crowd. Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Why? Because growth often looks awkward from the outside. Healing isn't photogenic. Silence isn't shareable. And character, it's invisible until it's tested. If you're always performing, you never get to just be. You don't need to impress people who don't even know the real you. You need to reconnect with the part of yourself that isn't performing, the part that knows what matters, even when no one else is watching. That's what Stoicism is about. Living by your own values, not the crowd's cheers, not the algorithm's rewards, not your followers' expectations. It's about asking yourself, would I still do this if it went unseen? Would I still choose this path if no one gave me credit? That question, as simple as it sounds, is one of the most liberating questions you can ever ask, because it peels away the noise, it silences the performance, and it brings you back home to yourself. No, I get it. We all care what others think. It's part of being human. We're wired for connection. But there's a difference between valuing connection and living for approval. One is rooted in authenticity, the other in fear. When you need validation to feel okay, You give away your power. You hand your self-worth to strangers, and then wonder why you always feel so uncertain even when the likes roll in. Let me ask you something even deeper. What would your life look like if you stopped needing to be liked? What would you start doing? What would you stop doing? Who would you disappoint? And what part of your soul would finally start breathing again? Because the cost of approval is often authenticity, and the longer you wear a mask, the harder it becomes to recognize your own reflection. So here's the shift. Instead of asking, will they like this? Ask, does this reflect who I really am? Instead of wondering, how do I look right now? Ask, how do I feel about this decision when I'm alone with myself? And instead of chasing relevance, start cultivating resonance. Because relevance fades, but resonance, that's timeless. It's not about being seen by everyone. It's about being at peace with yourself, even if no one's watching. And that's the Stoic way. Quiet, rooted, anchored, unmoved by the noise, guided by the truth. So today, I challenge you to do one thing, one real thing that no one else will see. Something for your growth, your values, your peace. No posts, no hashtags, just presence. Because that's where your freedom lives. Not in the crowd, but in your choice to stop performing and start living. Have you ever been around someone who makes every small inconvenience feel like a catastrophe? A wrong word, a missed text, a delayed reply, and suddenly you're caught in a storm that wasn't even yours to begin with. Here's what's important to understand. Emotion is not the enemy, but emotional instability, that's a warning sign. We all feel deeply. We get angry, hurt, disappointed. That's part of being human. But when those emotions constantly erupt, unchecked, unfiltered, and unexamined, they begin to control the room, and eventually control your life. Stoicism never told us to suppress emotion. That's a myth. The Stoics didn't preach emotional coldness. They taught emotional mastery. There's a difference. Emotional suppression says, feel nothing. Stoicism says, feel everything, but don't be ruled by any of it. It's not about being robotic. It's about being anchored. Because here's the truth. In a world that overreacts to everything, calmness is a rare form of power. You want to know who has real strength. Not the loudest person in the room, not the one who yells, slams doors, or explodes over minor inconveniences. True strength is the one who can pause, breathe, and respond with clarity. Someone bumps into you on the subway. Do you lash out? You get a text that rubs you the wrong way. Do you fire back impulsively? Your plans change last minute. Do you spiral? Or do you ask the one question that separates emotional reactivity from emotional maturity? Is this reaction serving me? Most of the time, it's not. Overreaction don't solve problems. They don't bring peace. They just stir the waters until you can't even see what's real beneath the surface. Let me give you something to consider. Imagine your emotions like waves. You can't stop them from rising, but you don't have to surf every one of them. Sometimes, the best thing you can do is stand still and let the wave pass. That doesn't make you weak. That makes you wise. Because not everything deserves your energy. Not every offense needs a war. And not every feeling needs to be voiced in the moment. There's a kind of quiet dignity that comes from knowing you could react, but choosing not to. It's the dignity of discipline, of someone who's done the inner work, who's been to war with themselves and come back whole. Now, let's be honest. This kind of calm doesn't happen by accident. It takes practice, self-awareness, reflection. It takes a decision, daily, to ask, is this frustration about them? Or is it touching something unresolved in me? Because most overreactions are just echoes of past wounds, old pain wearing new faces, unprocessed emotions asking for attention through intensity. And if you're constantly surrounded by someone who can't regulate their emotions, you'll start to carry that instability too. You'll walk on eggshells. You'll edit your words. You'll shape your truth to avoid their eruption. That's not love. That's self-erasure. And over time, it doesn't just damage the relationship. It damages your sense of safety, clarity, and identity. So, if this is something you see in someone close to you, or maybe even within yourself, pause, breathe. Remember what Epictetus said? It's not things that disturb us, but our view of them. You get to choose your view. You get to train your reactions. And more than anything, you get to protect your peace. You don't have to meet chaos with chaos. You can meet it with composure. And that might just be the most revolutionary thing you ever do. Because in the end, emotional maturity isn't about being numb. It's about being so in tune with your inner world that the outer world no longer controls you. That's not just Stoic wisdom. That's spiritual freedom. Let's talk about something that's easy to fall into, but hard to see when you're living in it. Materialism. We live in a world that's constantly whispering or shouting. You need more. More money. More stuff. More followers. More success. And it's subtle, because at first, it sounds like ambition, like motivation, like progress, but left unchecked, it becomes a hunger that can't be satisfied, a silent thief that robs you of peace, no matter how much you achieve. Here's the truth that nobody wants to admit. If your sense of worth is tied to what you own, you'll always feel like you're not enough, because someone will always have more. A nicer car, a bigger house, a newer phone, a lude life. And so we chase not out of joy, but out of fear. Fear of not being seen, fear of being left behind, fear of not being valuable without something to prove it. But ask yourself, when did life become a scoreboard? When did success become something you wear instead of something you are? The Stoics warned us about this. They lived in empires full of power, money, and fame, and yet they wrote about simplicity, self-control, and sufficiency. Seneca said, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, that is poor." Think about that. What if your poverty isn't in your wallet, but in your mindset? Because when you measure life by status, you miss the substance. When you chase luxury, you lose gratitude. When you're always trying to impress, you forget how to enjoy. Here's a question worth sitting with. Am I buying this from joy or from fear? Joy says, this adds meaning, peace, or beauty to my life. Fear says, this will make me feel valuable, lovable, or finally good enough. Those are two very different motives. Buying out of joy expands you, buying out of fear traps you. And the cost is high, not just financially but emotionally, because the more you depend on things to prove your worth, the more fragile your worth becomes. Lose the job, you crumble. See someone doing better, you spiral. I'll be a quiet month. You question your entire identity. That's not wealth, that's bondage. Real wealth, the kind that no one can take from you, comes from contentment, from knowing who you are when the noise is gone, from being grounded in something deeper than possessions. Let me be clear, there's nothing wrong with success. There's nothing wrong with wanting nice things, but it becomes a problem when you don't know who you are without them. If your confidence collapses when you lose the title, the car, or the attention, it wasn't confidence, it was camouflage. And here's the irony. The people who impress us most aren't the ones flaunting their lifestyle. They're the ones whose presence carries peace. They walk into a room without needing to prove a thing because they're not performing for anyone. That's what Stoicism calls us toward. A quiet kind of power. A life that isn't loud, but true. So the next time you're tempted to buy something just to fill a void, ask, what am I really hungry for? Connection, affirmation, belonging, because Gucci can't give you that. A new phone won't solve that, and Instagram likes won't heal that. Those are internal needs, and they require internal answers. The journey isn't about owning more, it's about needing less, not because you've settled, but because you've awakened. So don't chase the life that looks good on the outside. Chase the life that feels true on the inside. That's not just financial freedom, that's soul freedom. Have you ever met someone who keeps making the same mistakes, but never stops to ask why? They live on autopilot, repeating habits, relationships, reactions, as if life is just happening to them, not through them. They say things like, "That's just how I am," or "It's not my fault," as if growth is someone else's job. But here's the hard truth. If you avoid self-reflection, you also avoid transformation. And maybe, deep down, that's the real fear. Because change requires honesty. And honesty, the real, raw kind, is uncomfortable. The Stoics knew this well. They didn't believe in self-blame or shame, but they did believe in self-correction. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, journaled every day not to impress anyone, but to confront his own impulses, pride, and fears. He wrote not for the world, but for himself, because he understood something we've forgotten. If you don't examine your life will start running you. And when you live unexamined, you don't evolve. You repeat the same arguments, the same fears, the same disappointments. Why? Because nothing on the outside can truly change if nothing on the inside is being challenged. So let me ask you, and I mean this gently but seriously, when was the last time you sat still and asked yourself, where am I holding myself back? Not where others are failing you, not what the world isn't giving you, but where you are asleep at the wheel of your own life. Because sometimes it's not the world that needs to change, it's our perception of it. And that only comes through reflection. Real reflection isn't about spiraling in regret. It's about pausing long enough to notice the pattern and choosing something better. One powerful Stoic question you can ask daily is, did I act from fear or from strength today? You'll be surprised how often fear hides behind our decisions. Fear of rejection, fear of judgment, fear of failure. But if you don't name it, you can't face it. And if you can't face it, you'll keep obeying it quietly, unknowingly. And here's the danger. A life lived without reflection becomes a life lived by default. You react instead of respond. You cope instead of grow. You survive instead of live. Reflection is the mirror we hold up to ourselves, not to criticize, but to see what's working and what's not. To see whether we're being led by ego or by principle. To see if we're just aging or actually maturing. And I know it's easier to distract yourself, to stay busy, to scroll past the discomfort, to chase the next goal without ever asking why. But what's the cost? A career that looks impressive, but feels empty. A relationship that looks picture perfect, but lacks depth. A version of you that's successful, but not soulful. You don't have to have all the answers, but you do have to start asking better questions. Because the quality of your life will never exceed the quality of your self-awareness. So tonight, instead of Netflix or doom scrolling, take 10 minutes, grab a notebook, or just sit quietly and ask, where did I act from fear today? Where did I shrink when I could have stood tall? What feedback have I been avoiding because it stings too much? Not to beat yourself up, but to wake yourself up. Because self-reflection isn't punishment, it's power. It's how you break cycles. It's how you reclaim your voice. It's how you become someone who doesn't just live, but leads. Lead your thoughts. Lead your emotions. Lead your choices, so your future doesn't look like your past. The Stoics didn't leave us rules. They left us questions. And questions, the right ones, can set you free. So, I'll leave you with this. If you keep avoiding the mirror, what are you really afraid to see? And more importantly, who could you become if you had the courage to look? Let me ask you something most people don't ask themselves often. When I'm in a conversation, am I truly listening? Or am I just waiting for my turn to speak? It's subtle, but powerful. And it's one of the clearest signs of emotional immaturity when someone talks more to be heard than to understand. We've all encountered people like that. They dominate every conversation. They interrupt. They finish your sentences. not because they're evil or selfish often. It's insecurity dressed up as confidence. They speak to prove, to impress, to validate their own importance. But what they lack is presence, and presence doesn't shout, it listens. The Stoics had deep respect for silence. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." That wasn't just ancient wisdom, it was emotional intelligence in its rawest form. Because here's the truth, talking is easy. Listening requires discipline, and real listening isn't just about being quiet while the other person talks. It's about setting aside your mental script, your need to respond, to defend, to relate, and being willing to receive. You don't just hear their words, you feel their meaning. You catch what's beneath the silence. You notice what isn't being said. That's presence. That's power. But sadly, most of us have been trained to believe that the loudest voice wins. That to be seen, we must always have something to say. And so, we speak constantly yet feel deeply disconnected. Why? Because connection isn't built by noise. It's built by noticing. Noticing when someone's voice trembles. When they say "I'm fine," but their eyes say otherwise. When they pause longer than usual before answering. Those moments can't be felt if you're busy planning your next sentence. Listening is one of the rarest spiritual disciplines in today's world. It takes humility to listen. It takes restraint. It takes a mindset that says, "I don't need to be right. I need to understand." In Stoic practice, silence isn't awkward, it's sacred. It's the space where reflection happens, where clarity rises, where ego gets quiet enough to hear what truth actually sounds like. So I challenge you, not just today, but for the rest of this week, in your conversations, pause before you reply. Breathe. Notice your urge to fill the silence, and then ask yourself, am I listening to understand or just rehearsing my next line? Because if you're always talking, you miss the gold in the silence. You miss the cues. You miss the chance to see someone not just through their words, but through their humanity. You also miss the chance to know yourself. Because often, the deepest insights don't come from speaking your truth. They come from hearing someone else's sand, letting it change you. Here's the paradox. When you speak less, your words carry more weight. When you listen more, your presence becomes unforgettable. People remember how you made them feel. And there's no faster way to make someone feel valued than by truly listening to them without judgment, without rushing, without trying to fix or one-up. That kind of listening, it doesn't just change conversations. It changes relationships. It changes you. So ask yourself tonight, do I dominate conversations out of fear that silence makes me invisible? Can I let others speak without feeling the need to outshine them? Can I listen not with my ears, but with my soul? Because silence isn't empty, it's full of wisdom if you're willing to lean into it. Let's be clear, this video was never about pointing fingers. It's not about labeling others as stupid or putting ourselves on a pedestal of wisdom. It's about something far more powerful, awareness, the quiet, honest kind of awareness that comes when we stop blaming the world and start looking inward. Because the truth is, we've all seen pieces of ourselves in these signs. Moments when we avoided responsibility. Times we let validation control us. Days we reacted out of emotion instead of clarity. Seasons when growth scared us more than stagnation. And that's okay. This path, this pursuit of wisdom, it doesn't require you to be perfect. It asks something deeper. Are you willing to become more conscious than you were yesterday? You see, Stoicism doesn't demand that we never feel anger, or fear, or doubt. It simply teaches us not to let those things define us. It invites us to respond to life not impulsively, but intentionally. So ask yourself right now, not with shame, but with sincerity, which of these signs hit closest to home? Where am I being called to grow? What have I been pretending not to know about myself? Because that's where change begins. Not in grand gestures or overnight breakthroughs, but in the quiet moment You choose to be honest with yourself. That moment you say, I want more than surface-level validation. I'm ready to stop reacting and start reflecting. I'm done living on autopilot. Wisdom, real wisdom, isn't a destination. It's a practice, a daily decision to choose clarity over confusion, responsibility over blame, depth over distraction. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Growth always is. But so is staying stuck in patterns that no longer serve you. So here's the invitation, not just from me, but from the ancient voices of Stoic philosophy and the future version of you that's waiting to emerge. You don't have to fix everything today, but you do have to start somewhere. Maybe that means pausing before reacting. Maybe it means asking deeper questions. Maybe it means listening more than you speak. Or maybe it means letting go of a version of yourself that felt safe but small. The good news: you're not alone on this path. Millions are waking up choosing self-awareness, emotional maturity, and spiritual depth over shallow approval. And every time you choose to reflect instead of react, you're already ahead. Every time you ask, what is this here to teach me? You're already wiser. So as we close, I leave you with this. Don't aim to be flawless. Aim to be aware. And from that awareness, live your life as a daily practice of becoming the kind of person you respect when no one's watching. Wisdom doesn't shout, it whispers, but only the present and willing can hear it. And if you've made it this far, I think you're already listening. If this message resonated with you, don't just let it pass. Take a moment, pause, reflect, and share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this video made you stop and think? And if you're on a journey of becoming more intentional, more grounded, and more conscious, this channel was made for you. So subscribe, not for entertainment, but for transformation. Turn on the bell so you never miss a reminder to slow down and grow deeper. And if someone you care about is struggling with these patterns, send this to them. Let's grow together, one reflection at a time.